you a musician interested in improving your performance? Welcome to Notes on Jazz. I'm your host, Keith Davis. If you want to learn more about jazz improvisation, harmony, and composition, or just want to improve your piano skills, this is the place for you. We'll be hosting interviews with fellow musicians, offering tips and techniques on study and practice, and lots of other cool stuff. Whatever instrument you play, or if you're a vocalist, you will find something helpful and interesting here. So come hang out with us at Notes on Jazz. All right, welcome to Notes on Jazz. I'm really happy today to have a good friend of mine and great drummer. He's not only a drummer, he's a composer. He's an all-around just a great musician, and he's going to have a lot of interesting things to say. So how's it going, Al?
It's going good, Keith. Thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to have you here, man.
Yeah, it's great.
I just had one of your buddies on a couple of weeks ago, Martin Bejarano, as I told you.
Oh my gosh, have I got stories to tell. So Martin and I were roommates in Florida State. And that, where the Florida State jazz program is incredible now. And it was really good back then, but in the formative stages. And I feel like that ensemble with Martin, because we won a couple Downbeat awards and started doing gigs through the bass player that we were working with. He was friends with Marcus Printup, and Printup was on Blue Note. So we started doing tours while we were in college. And that was like, not many people were doing that at Florida State, where you're like taking off a weekend to go do a date at a jazz club with like a guy who's on Blue Note Records. And Martin showed up and was like spectacular. So it's not surprising to any one of us who've met him. Number one, he's a phenomenal human being, like top shelf human being. And then really wonderful, gifted musician, like incredibly talented. But I remember we had a drum set in our apartment, and I would come home and he would just be going nuts, hitting the drums like crazy, playing against Rage Against the Machine. And that was the thing that we first connected with. We were always kind of like, when you're in an institution, there's an aspect of like, hey, we're doing jazz. So don't talk about the fact that I have this incredible love for Soundgarden and Matt Cameron's drumming, or don't talk about the fact that we love riff rock like Rage Against the Machine or some of these things. Yeah. So it was kind of nice to have someone who was a compadre. There were several of us that were sort of on this fringe of like, yeah, we love studying the Keith Jarrett trio and Bill Evans trio. We played so much trio and just experimented. That was when I fell in love with like piano trio. Right. But then we would like, when we were on our off time, like, loving everything about the 90s in terms of like rock and roll. He came to Charlotte. I was playing at Middle C and doing a whole thing of like drummer, songwriter stuff. I did all these arrangements, like basically for like a hybrided quartet. And I did an arrangement of the Foo Fighters. I forgot the tune, man, but it was, I did a Foo Fighters tune. I did a Don Henley song, and a lot of them I was just trying to get out of 4/4. So I arranged these songs like Boys of Summer by Don Henley. I wrote that. I did an arrangement in 7/8. So I flew Martin in to kind of play on it. I was like, I need someone who's going to like take this over the top, and it was just an opportunity for us to jam. And when I picked him up from the airport, he had a Foo Fighters t-shirt on. And it was like, I was like, bro, that's the reason I love you, man. You're like hanging with the elite of jazz and playing with all of them. And you love the Foo Fighters. It's like, it's really refreshing, So he's a great guy. I'm glad you had him on. I'm sure the conversation was awesome.
Yeah, I'll have it out there pretty soon. I'm sure you'll.
Good.
Yeah, sure you'll dig it. Yeah. So, but let's talk about you, man.
Okay. So, where would you like to begin?
Well, yes. Tell me how you got into music. A lot of this focus here is for young musicians. I'm trying to get young musicians, give them some great musicians like you who talk about their experience, how they got into music, and what they think about it. So tell us.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, that's spectacular. Yeah. Pretty simple. I'm a band director's kid. So my dad, growing up, at least the earliest memories I have would be when we moved to Texas. I'm from Florida originally. I was born there. My dad kind of had his first teaching job and then took this kind of 5 or 6A school in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I just remember being a kid hanging around the band room and like literally the little guy, little Al, Al's son, like walking next to the drum line, walking into the high school, football games, listening to the drum line, or on a weekend hanging around the band room. And I just gravitated to the drums,
Yeah.
and so I remember being 5 years old, and my dad had gotten me. I think I still have it. I won't belabor the point, but I still have this practice pad. It was one of these old Ludwig practice pads,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my dad had got me a practice pad and a pair of sticks. And I started making beats on the floor because the floor kind of had like a kick drum sound, and the snare, if I popped it hard enough, I was already making beats when I was 5, and then it gravitated to my mom's pots and pans, and that became problematic. So my dad got me, he just started makeshifting and bringing home like odd drums that they weren't using at the band room. So I had like this, looking back, it's spectacular. I had this 18-inch Rogers kick, which I wish I could get it back, but because it was an 18-inch Rogers kick, this like, I think it was a acrylite snare. And then the cymbal was horrible. It was like a crash cymbal from a marching band set. So it's like, if you think a cymbal is pingy, this is the pingingest thing in the world. It was like a 16-inch. So it just is, and that's all I had. And I had FM radio and a pair of headphones. And so I just started playing along to that. And just, I don't even remember. I just remember loving, it was like, looking back, I think I have like deep in my subconscious, like, I know Steely Dan. I know all these like 70s songs. Like I legit will be walking through a mall, and if I hear Fleetwood Mac, I start having flashbacks from being in the Gap in the 70s with my parents, and then also playing along to it on the radio and not knowing it was Fleetwood Mac. So that's kind of where the bug started. My dad, obviously being a band director, he was a music lover. So, I mean, I grew up with like Bernstein like LPs with like Leonard Bernstein conducting the New York Phil, Buddy Rich's, the best of the Buddy Rich big band. And then my mom's collection was like Engelbert Humperdinck and Tom Jones. So my life was this hybrid of like highbrow and like just working man music, So I find myself gravitating those spaces a lot, My dad did a wonderful thing, but it's a time I hated. When it was getting ready to he's like, listen, when it comes to school band, you can do drums, but you got to take piano lessons like now. So when I was 5 or 6 years old, I took private piano lessons until I started what would have been like normal school band, which I grew up in a really small town in Northwest Missouri. And they started school band at like I think it was fourth grade, which was crazy because it was earlier than like the normal middle school. So I started fourth grade band. I kind of stopped taking piano lessons at that point. And so that, looking back, it was incredible because that gave me an education that shifted over into percussion, which that's kind of being in a high school band, middle school and high school band program is very formalized, marching band in the fall and then symphonic band. And so yeah, I did the whole normal band route. I think the biggest thing that would have been the tipping point outside of my natural just desire to play percussion was my dad. I'll never forget getting a birthday note from my dad. Well, my mom and dad. I got a little birthday card. It was like, hey, this is a year's private lessons with your dad, So I started taking private lessons because my dad was the director of bands at the college, but the percussion instructor. So a lot of those smaller universities, everybody's having to double up. So like the brass guy was the jazz ensemble guy. So I would go to the university and that my dad was teaching at, Northwest Missouri State, and I would take percussion lessons from him. So that led to auditioning for all district, going to all state band, getting into programs over the summer. So there was just all this extracurricular stuff. So so music was like a really big part of my life, and it just being around my dad. But the thing about it is, like, my mom and dad never pressured. I have a younger sister who's 5 years younger than me. It was never like, you're going to be a musician, you're going to do this. It was like, hey, this is so I was in sports. I did drama club. I remember doing Lincoln Douglas debate. Like I was very active in high school, but somewhere around my sophomore year of high school, I'd played basketball on the freshman basketball team. And I just remember having to make a decision. I just had this realization of like, man, if I really commit myself to this and start really doing some serious practicing, I probably could get out of this small town. Not looking back, it was wonderful as like it was pretty Mayberry-ish, for those people who haven't watched the Andy Griffith Show. It was like small town, everybody knew everybody's dirty laundry and clean laundry, and it was wonderful. It was very safe, so I'm really thankful for that. But there was an aspect of like, man, I feel like anytime I go to New York, even to visit family, because my dad's family's from the Bronx, we'd go and visit. I just felt like, man, this is it, man. Like I just felt so alive in a bigger environment, bigger atmosphere. And so I was a dreamer, and so I was like, man, if I'm going to get out of here, not because I don't love my parents, but just to get opportunities. So my sophomore year of high school is when it really clicked. And I started practicing a ton, made the all-state band, mostly on the legit side. Drum set was sort of like this thing that was like, I did it, I loved it, but my dad didn't really teach me that. So I was transcribing with all the like notational information that I learned from my dad. I was kind of a guinea pig for sight reading with my dad. He was like beta testing all these ideas on sight reading and learning that. And I just would transcribe stuff like Steve Smith and some of the popular stuff of the day. But being a band director's son, my mom was always super supportive. They were just like, they never pushed it on me. I just kind of fell into it. And then I was real fortunate to get a full ride to Florida State to do percussion. So I got out of the state and went back to my dad's alma mater, which really wasn't planned. But I liked the school because it was a private, it was a school of music. So it had the aspects of an Eastman or a Juilliard. But then there was like the capability of having a social life and like maybe meeting people that weren't musicians. So I really appreciated that. I was there for a year. I got my butt handed to me at a jam session, which is an important thing. It's because I didn't realize this at the time, but Tallahassee, Florida's in the Panhandle, and there's a really happening jazz scene between Jacksonville, Tallahassee, and all the way to New Orleans. That whole line along I-10 is nuts. And so I was really, one of the biggest records for me that kind of turned me on to jazz was my dad had an LP, The Best of Art Blakey, and then The Best of Buddy Rich. And so my senior year of high school, I remember getting a compact disc player, big technological advancement. And one of my friends gave me J-Mood by Wynton Marsalis. And I put it in the record player, and I put the CD in the compact disc, and I put on my headphones, and I'd never heard anything so complex and beautiful and deep. And I'm reading the liner notes, which for those of you who are in the digital age, every record, every CD would come with a booklet that had information, and they were written by this man called Stanley Crouch. And I would read them, and they'd be like, the drummer Jeff Tane Watts is channeling da-da-da-da-da, and he would list all these drummers. And I was a young kid, so I'd write all these drummers down on a card just like this. Hang on. Like these little note cards, and I would fold that thing and put it in my wallet. And I was an hour and a half drive from the nearest record store in Kansas City. And I would drive down to Kansas City, and I started just buying records my senior year of high school. And so when I went to Florida State, I was like doing percussion. That was my major. But I'd heard that Marcus Roberts was living in Tallahassee, and he was part of Wynton's band. And I knew that name from buying because that was sort of my gateway, was Wynton's music. Yeah. It was, this was in the 90s, 1990 is when I was in my freshman year. So I heard that Herb Harris and some of the guys that were playing in Marcus's band lived in Tallahassee. And my drum set teacher, who was a doctoral student at Florida State named Stephen Hemphill, Stephen was like, you should come down to the jam, and I'm like, what's that? I had no idea what it was. I was kind of like sheltered kid from the Midwest. And he's like, well, you can sit in because you're my student. So you can just find a tune you want to play. Looking back, I really wasn't prepared for it. Like I play a jam session here in Charlotte at Petra's every Monday night. And, I have students that are taking lessons from me. I teach at Davidson College and at Central Piedmont Community College. And I have a lot of students that want to come sit in. So I've learned from this experience, particularly like, hey, let's learn Doxy. Let's learn Cantaloupe Island. Wherever like an easy gravitational pull. So if a drummer's coming to me and all they've played along to is Grateful Dead records, well, we might want to find something that's got a little pop feel to it. But if someone's played a little bit of jazz, we could gravitate that. So I show up cold turkey, white kid, just at this jam session, and Marcus does hand signals like to communicate to the ensemble because he's blind.
Right.
Phenomenal musician, these guys. And I sat in on a blues, and the whole time I just felt like looking back, I was not happening at all. Like I literally left there going like, why did I do that? I am terrible at the drums. And it was great, man, because I grew up in a little small town. And when you play drum set in a small town and you're like even mediocre, right. You're kind of like elevated, like, oh, do a drum solo. You're in the pet band. It's like all the things, right? So that inspired me to go to Berkeley because I knew that Jeff I know Jeff Watts had gone there, Vinny and Steve Smith, a lot of guys that I was aware of had gone there, and it gave me an opportunity to go to Boston. And that was a game changer because I auditioned at Florida State and got in the second big band. And then I'll stop talking after this, but because I'm sure you got another question. But this is how it all happened, man. It's like I went to Berkeley and I studied specifically with John Ramsey. John was one of Alan Dawson's students. Alan Dawson was an incredible instructor. And the more you look back at the pedagogy of drum set education, he did some things that really took what was sort of like learning by rote and codified it in a way to where like it influenced John Riley, it influenced Ed Soph. It was literally the jettison for drum set education and really starting the process of like formally being able to educate people in about jazz rhythm, the evolution of that, but in a formalized context, which is very helpful when you're teaching at a collegiate level. If you're just showing up and taking lessons, you can still learn the music by just transcribing. But when people want to get into academia, there's a lot of things that need to be codified. And I don't know that a lot of people know that Alan Dawson was one of the originators to take sort of the world of snare drum, right? And take these snare drum books and begin to creatively use it to teach someone how to comp with their left hand and start to have these, not just coordination to play the jazz music, but also the interdependence. Because there's a lot of codependent, I won't get into that, but there's a lot of interdependence that has to happen in drumming, and I think a lot of drummers, we have to give a lot of grace to ourselves because a lot of the drumming situation up to that, like to do a double stroke roll or a paradiddle, there's codependence that happens. Our right and left hands have to coordinate in such a way that they're one unit. Whereas interdependence, when you're playing jazz, your limbs need to function and create a one thing, but they have to be very independent in what they're presenting, depending on the style. So I couldn't afford to do all of that because Berkeley, I didn't get any scholarship. I was there in 91. Abe Laboriel Jr. was there. Johnny Rabb was there. Melvin Butler was there, who went on to play with Brian Blade Fellowship. So there are a lot of cats that were there that are still people that I know. And I got into a really good ensemble. Matt Garrison was the bass player in the ensemble I was in. So I was like, just some really cool things. And then studying with John was like an eye-opening experience to like, really woodshedding at that time, the things that I needed to woodshed. I ran out of money. And this was, for those of you who are watching, it's 2023. The idea that people didn't have mobile devices is probably insane to you. Yeah, right. But like my percussion instructor, it blows my mind. I'm of a particular faith. I'm not really an evangelical type of person, but sometimes you just got to look out there and just realize there were some things happening that I couldn't control that were really just, I'm super grateful. Like my percussion instructor from Florida State, who was one of Saul Goodman's students, was the New York Philharmonic timpanist for forever. So this guy's a heavyweight. He calls me and leaves me a message, like found my number, calls me and leaves me a message at Berkeley. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And literally like, man, he's like, hey, we'd love for you to come back. Offered me more money because they had won the state, like the national football thing. So a lot of non-majors were coming. So I started teaching then as an undergrad, non-major undergrads. I made the top ensemble. That's when Martin showed up. So what would have been my junior year in college is when Martin Bejarano showed up as a freshman. And we just instantly connected.
This is
What's that?
FSU.
Yeah, I went back to Florida State.
Right.
Yeah. In the middle of that, I had auditioned and totally forgot that I auditioned for Carnival Cruise Lines. And because there was this cat that was my dad, he was the jazz ensemble instructor at the school that my dad was teaching at, the college. And I'd come home from Berkeley for winter break. I'll never forget. He's like, hey, you got to make a demo cassette and a resume and send it to this guy down at Carnival. He's looking for musicians who like, are together. You got to be able to play, but they're really having problems with guys, doing the job and not drinking too much or this, that, and the other.
Right, right, right.
I'm like, well, I don't do any of that stuff, man. So, so I auditioned. I forgot all about it. I get home and I wasn't sure what I was going to do for that summer of '92, and I got the job playing for Carnival Cruise Lines. And it was crazy because I met guys from Harry Connick's band. So for those of you who don't remember, like Harry Connick would have been like the Michael Bublé of the '90s. Like he did this movie Harry Met Sally, and he just exploded in popularity. So the fact that these cats were like coming off of Harry Connick's gig, and they had been on this like really popular big video that put on VHS tape of his band live. They were a killer band. And these guys were in the big band I was in. So I'm 20, and the next oldest cat in the band is like 30. And I've got this gig right out of Berkeley, and I've been shedding my butt off. And so it was like this 1-2 punch of like learning all this stuff from John at Berkeley, and then getting this gig where cats are like a stack of CDs, because they were all the brown paper charts, like, Nestico and all that bassy stuff. Right. And I remember the lead trumpet player, who's still a friend of mine and the dean at the music school at Nyack now. I saw him this last year when I was in New York playing at Carnegie, and I told him this. I'm like, man, you changed my life, because he literally came into my room on the cruise ship and was like, his stack of records, Keith, a stack of CDs like 12 inches off the table, and just went, you need to learn these. You don't need to be in the charts. And it was like the first time where I'd kind of had like a mentor, just like, man, do this. This is, so I went back to Florida State, graduated. I fell in love that summer, and that's why I moved to Charlotte, and that's where I live now. So the nice thing about Florida State was I finished my undergraduate, and we had some really good things happening with the jazz ensemble, and they were wanting to have a drum set program started. So I ended up staying and being a grad assistant and finishing my master's degree. So that was really great. Looking back, again, that was just a really awesome window. It was like, It was just kind of made available for me. And looking back, it's been wonderful. I had, debated about whether I should stay in school or not when I did the Carnival Cruise Line gig, because a lot of those guys were like, man, you should move to New York. We could get you connected. And looking back, that might have been awesome. I could have always gone back to school, but I think, I don't know if I'd have been able to go back to school and come out with a master's degree with no debt. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to pay for anything, so it was really fortunate. And that's been really instrumental in like being here in Charlotte and being able to teach, because I really love teaching. And just having that master's degree has really opened some doors. So that's how I got into music. And currently I'm playing with, I currently play with a whole bunch of different artists in different genres, and I teach at a couple colleges, and life's really good. So
yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, it's very inspiring to hear their story, man. So I thought you were at Miami for a while too. Is that not right?
No, I never studied at Miami. I was always at Florida State, and Martin went to Miami.
Yeah,
Martin finished, I know he finished his undergrad at Florida State, and I don't know if because when we were together, he was getting calls from Ignacio Barroa. I remember we were rooming together, and he got a call from Ignacio to go do the Modern Drummer Festival. And that was sort of the beginning of Martin kind of getting connected in New York with other cats. And then I think he moved to New York, and then Martin went to Miami to do his master's, and now he's on faculty there. Yeah.
Just before we go to the next topic, I'll tell you, you were mentioning Alan Dawson. I had the opportunity to hear Alan Dawson live in a club in Boston when I was at Berkeley. And I sat with his hi-hat between my knees. That's how close I was to him, and
that's amazing.
The whole night just watching him, man. His motion of playing the drums was just so like relaxed.
Yes.
And perfect. And
yeah. John.
It was beautiful to watch. I have that book, John Ramsey's book that he did of Alan's stuff too. That's really.
Yeah. So that's a really great book. And then when I was studying with John, like he taught me all of that stuff that's in the book. That was sort of our curriculum, because he was sort of a disciple of Dawson. And that I also, John, it's crazy. John was when Art decided to start singing, Art had a big band, right? And the Marsalises were in that, and Art started to sing, and he needed another drummer in the band, and that was John.
Wow.
So John also wrote this incredible book on Art Blakey, and I have, like, he was working on it when I was there, so I actually have all these like handwritten notes and stuff because we were studying that stuff too. So John's great, man. I haven't stayed in contact with him at all, but I don't know what I think he's still at Berkeley, but yeah, Dawson, that stuff changed my life, so definitely a good thing.
Yeah. Well, man, tell me about how you approach teaching and what you recommend to students, that kind of aspect of what you do, I know.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you've got a lot of experience, and that'd be
helpful. Well, first I try to meet, drums, I boil it down to three things. There's sticking, rhythm, and then orchestrating it. So I try to keep it very simple. Like, rights and lefts are sticking, and there's combinations, infinitum combinations. And then rhythm, I'm currently working on a book to help with this. But rhythm is obviously a very important thing for any musician, but for drummers, it needs to move from a place of like you're counting things to like you're reading it like you're reading a book. So I focus a lot on that, because then when we pull all that stuff together and we start orchestrating it around a drum set of any size, all of that stuff, now the reference point it's more relevant, but I used to say I'm a little bit like a Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid. I'm not necessarily having kids wax floors or hang their coats up, but I definitely feel like I try to let my students know, like, listen, there's a lot of guys that are going to teach you hacks. They're going to teach you grooves. They're going to teach you by rote, and that's wonderful. And that's one way to approach the instrument. But the way I was taught was, you don't just cook a meal for somebody, you show them how to cook. Yeah. So it's like, I want to make sure that I'm at least getting some context of rhythmic vocabulary and reading. And I've figured out ways to help people that have no background in rhythm education, like they don't know one-eanda or anything like that. I've figured out little ways to backtrack, maybe put some training wheels and get ourselves there. Because ultimately, I want my students to walk away and be able to educate themselves. I feel like teaching, I don't know what the quote is. I feel like I'm still excited. I'm still privately taking lessons I've studied with John Riley. I'm currently taking some lessons from Dave Elich. And anytime I get off a lesson that I'm in, I just am so energized to go like take that experience and create that experience with my students. So sticking, rhythm, orchestration, and then orchestration is kind of like, well, that orchestration can lend itself to, okay, we'd like to focus on swing or jazz. I'd like to be a really great rock drummer. I'd like to be a really great, depending on the focus of the student. I just like all sorts of different styles of music. Yeah. So I've always practiced a variety of different styles. So I think that's helpful too, is that I'm very interested. There's some music that I'm like, no thanks. It's just not my particular love, like country. Some of it, I just don't, because if I'm going to listen to a song that has lyrics, I like people that are a little more poetic, like a Peter Gabriel or a Bjork. Ryan Adams, guys like that, like songwriters, Yeah. So when I'm teaching, I always try to have goals with my students, and then everything I said before, based on what they'd like to accomplish. If it's a private student, obviously there's some subjectivity to that, within the university context. I think it's the same thing, unless they're in an ensemble. The community college I'm at, they don't have ensembles. So it's a little more subjective and like, well, what's your goal? Well, my goal is to get into a 4-year institution. Cool. Well, that's our goal. With some of my other students, the goal is we're really trying to hone in on what they're going to be doing in their jazz ensemble. But I really try to like have a goal each semester or with any student and move them that direction in a way that I would consider is holistic to the craft of drumming. Like, let's have really good let's have good technique, good posture, let's be versatile. So yeah, I try to be open-ended, but at the same time I always end up coming back to what I call the perennial truths of drums, which are like sticking, rhythm, and then moving around the kit in the most fluid way possible. And so yeah, that's kind of where I start.
Gotcha. That's great. So I'm doing a little thing with the setting here.
No problem.
I'm getting a little bit of a buzz from time to time when you're talking. I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Okay, let me check my audio level. It's probably me talking too loud.
It might be that, or it might be me having my my speaker up too loud.
Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm peaking on volume level. So
you're on Zoom, so are you seeing that on? Okay, I see what you mean. I see.
Yeah, I'm going to my audio settings and looking, and it's not peaking in the audio settings when I'm talking. So
yeah, okay, it's cool. I think
it might just be your speaker.
I turned it down. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. I'll edit that out, of course.
No problem.
Yeah, so that's great, man. Very good. That, like I said, a lot of this stuff is focused on younger students. I want to give them some pointers on how to learn, what they have, how to learn and how to find a good teacher is another important aspect.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we live in this age of like we're saturated with content, and a lot of that content is it's clickbait.
Sure.
And I'm not going to be negative, but there's a lot of people that are incredible players that are not necessarily good at teaching, because, like they may be able to do these incredible things, but are they able to take you where you're at and make you the best you that you can be? Because the last thing, it's great to emulate players. That's where every person starts, in a place of like imitation and mimicry. That's wonderful. And then in that, I'm a big fan of like, hey man, just own it. Like if you want to sound like Brian Blade or Vinnie Colaiuta or, Ronnie Vannucci, from the Killers, like whatever genre of music you're in, go for it. Like go all in, analyze their drumming, their drum sounds. If it's Elvin Jones, do a deep dive. And go for it. Because in the midst of like imitating that player, you will then find your own voice.
Right.
And that's in it. I think a lot of people, and I understand that it's like we are all individually unique. So it's kind of impossible for you to be Elvin Jones because you're not Elvin Jones. But that doesn't mean you can't be you. Like Mark Giuliano is a huge Elvin Jones fan, and there's elements of his playing. He's an incredible musician and such a kind guy. But I don't think he sounds like Elvin Jones. But there's elements of his phrasing and the organic side of like when he's like a rhythmic master. The guy is incredible. But I know he's a massive Elvin Jones fan, so he probably did a deep dive, and in that like imitation to like the end journey is, we have Mark Giuliano. He did the work,
Right.
I remember hearing Brian Blade, I think it was a podcast, and they were like, well, Brian, what would you tell younger players about learning music? He's like, find 10 records that you love and study the entire record, top to finish. Just know the record. Like, and I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I definitely know Bright Size Life. I can sing along to every solo. I don't necessarily know that I've broken down Bob Moses's drumming. I started kind of thinking about records that have been those like go-to records all the time, whether it's any genre of music. But I think that's a really good thing, even so I think I think that's a good point about teachers. That's the thing I'm trying to say. Because I've studied with some guys that are really incredible jazz drummers online. I've taken lessons with them. And I look back and I was like, they really weren't good at communicating the information. It was more like, hey, I'm doing this.
Right.
And I'm just like, I don't know how to get to that point. Like,
right.
you know. But there's a lot of guys that are really good, like John Riley. The lesson I took with him, unbelievable. So yeah, you want to find. I mean, when you get to a certain level, I mean, there's certain
Yeah.
basic things, but when you get to a level of advanced high school or college, it's really important to find someone that's almost like a coach,
Sure.
where it's not they are obviously they are kind of subjectively, meaning person in a personal way, helping you at your place become the best you can be. And I want to stress that, because a lot of what good teaching, we're not machines, so there's not this press
Right.
where I can just like and just press somebody. Hey, do this, the same thing that the last guy. There are some perennial truths, I'm sure, to piano. There's piano. What I mean by perennial is like they're a flower, right? They come up annually. You don't have to replant them. There are things that we can't get away from. Like if you're going to play drums, you should know the rudiments. And there's a whole other things that you should be looking at. So when I say perennial truths, they're just basic things that you're not going to get away from, that you will have to come back to, that you need to spend time on. And I've found a lot of drum teachers don't teach that, So a lot of guys are like, hey, play this beat. And then no one can read music and you're kind of stuck. It's like if a doctor's just giving you medicine and not teaching you how to take care of yourself, and eat properly and things like preventative versus like symptomatic. But those are big words. But I think getting the right teacher, and when you're young, you're not going to know that. I was just really fortunate that my dad was teaching me, and then he kind of knew the right people to get me with. Like if I'd have gone to some music store, I don't know that I would have known any different,
Sure.
So, but yeah, when you get to a certain level and you're choosing colleges or choosing places to go, like, yeah, you want to make sure that that person's going to be there, that they're going to help you get to where you want to be as a player. So,
yeah, that's great, man. So the next thing I'd like to ask you about is I want to hear what you're doing. Tell me about your projects that you're involved in.
Yeah. So I'm currently, I've maintained performing with a guy named Jason Upton. He's a singer-songwriter, and another guy named John Mark McMillan. I'm just really fortunate. These guys are kind of outliers. I am of the Christian faith. Again, I'm not really evangelical about it. But these guys are in that genre of music, but are really not. They're very indie, and they're both very poetic. And I've always loved poetry. Currently reading a guy by the name of David White, and I'm very fortunate to work with him. So I'm able to like bring my creativity of not just rhythm and drumming, but just overall, like how do we like atmosphere of a track. So that's really fun, because I've been involved in like the studio, and a lot of when you're drumming as a drummer in a studio project or with original artists, you have this opportunity to kind of put a beat on a song, or enhance the song, and that's the song, that a lot of people are going to hear, and that's the beat. And so you show up at a place and someone's playing that song and they're playing your rhythm that you play, the thing that you made up. So I like that, where I kind of get an opportunity to do something that uses my creativity. And so I've been fortunate to do that. I also play with a cellist and a vocalist named Shauna Tucker. Got a residency coming up with her in Colorado. She calls her stuff chamber soul, because she literally is playing cello and singing like at the same time. And she's really wonderful at both. She writes a lot. Again, she's an original songwriter. We do a lot of covered arrangements of some cool, like selected covers, or like not standards. I mean, she does Bye Bye Blackbird, but like we might do, What's Love Got to Do by, she's got a really good version of What's Love Got to Do with it. I think that's like Tina Turner. It's an old hit that Tina Turner had. Cool version of that. But then she's a songwriter as well. So I find myself a lot in the songwriter space. The cool thing about Shauna is that we're switching gears. Like I'm playing a samba. I might be playing a Latin tune. I might be playing some derivative of a Brazilian rhythm, but I'm using broomsticks and a shaker. And then I'm playing a full-on pop groove, but everything, it's a cello player, y'all. So it's like there's that string. So it's like your dynamic has to be that much lower. Juxtapose that to like my recent Instagram post. I was playing with a rock artist, and his name's Trent Thompson. He's an incredible frontman, songwriter. He's local to Charlotte, really hasn't broken out yet, but he will. And that's like Foo Fighters. So I have, I really, I mean, I have a friend of mine who's like, you kind of always wanted to be, I always wanted to be like, as a drummer, I always felt like it was a really opportunity. I mean, like I was able to switch. I have a lot of different interests. And it's, my education on the drum set came through jazz, but at the same time, I was listening to all sorts of the pop music, like it's always been really intelligent pop, like Radiohead, Soundgarden. It's bands that are like saying something. Like I'm not like, yeah, I'm not going to get into that, but like, I switch gears a lot. So I've got a lot of freelance work I'm doing. I do remote tracking here in my studio. And so that's been a cool education to learn about microphones. And I just updated my system to where, for those of you who are kind of techie, like I have 12 channels of preamp, and I run it through I have two universal audio rack units. And so what's wonderful about that is it comes with I have all these plugins that I can put on top of the drums. So if the drums sound good, then I enhance them a little bit. So the tracks that I'm sending back now to clients are it's over the top. You can't even tell it's really from this tiny little space. Yeah. So that's been a lot of fun. And at 51 years old, it's been awesome to kind of learn how incredible YouTube is. There's so much information out there. In a good way. I think a lot of the content that's drum oriented is still it can be a little bit clickbaity, where it's like really fast chops and all this stuff. And I think being a good musician is a lifetime, and there's no life hack on it. It's just, you've got to do the work. And my dad used to say this to me, and I think it's a really wise statement. I think it's your late 30s, you start realizing, man, my parents were really smart. So that's a good tip. Like, if you don't think your parents are cool, just wait till you're in your late 30s. It'll get better. But I remember my dad saying, Alfred, like the key to mastery is repetition. One key to mastering something is repetition. But within that repetition, you've got to have an element of creativity to be coming back to the same things. And I think that's where going back to instruction, Keith, I didn't say this, but I think that's where teachers can like having the right teacher. It's like, how many times can we come back to this thing that you need to work on where you don't get bored of it? Because, like how many different ways can you run scales? Like It's a lot. It just depends on whether you have the creativity or you have the right influences in your life to help you come back to these things that are essential parts of being a really good musician. Absolutely. So that was a really cool thing. So that's been cool because I'm learning the recording process. I've always been involved in it, but now I'm on this side. I am getting ready to start I've always wanted to do a loop package, which loop packages are where you're just recording grooves and sound samples for people to use and buy in like a 35. You can buy $30 and you get all these different drum loops at different meters. I've had people approach me and ask me to do that for a long time, and I'm finally going to do that. But I've been trying to find a way to enhance that with an educational component. So what I'm calling it Mode 4 Studio. So it's MOD, and the O has a line over the top for the long O. So it's Mode 4 Studio, and it's going to be basically taking genres, particular albums by particular artists, and deep diving on them and analyzing the grooves, transcribing the grooves, and then creating sound samples that are basically the documentation of me deep diving into these things and microphone choices, drum choices, cymbal choices, and recreating these grooves as sample packages for people to use. The first one I'm jumping into is I'm jumping into one of my favorite hip hop artists from the 90s, Tribe Called Quest. And I've already transcribed all the grooves from Low End Theory, and I'm working with a producer to reproduce all those drum sounds. So that's coming soon. And then I am currently working on a book. I'm working on a book that is sort of revamping my dad's unfinished PhD. I'm pretty sure he started his PhD and didn't finish it because it was just too much to be a full-time teacher and have two kids and be a dad. and then try and get a PhD. So he never finished it, but it was basically on sight reading and the connectivity between rhythm as language. Like the way we read words and the way we read music should be the same thing. And so I've started that process, and I literally was looking back at my notes from my lessons with John Ramsey, and John told me this story, this Art Blakey quote is sort of the premise of the book. Art would often say, "John, you got to hear with your eyes and see with your ears." And I feel like a lot of musicians with rhythm or notes, right? There's this aspect of like, we read silently books, or but we don't equate the idea of like rhythm as a language. We say, well, music is the universal language, but none of us are reading in rhythm like as if it's words on a page. Like when I see a musical phrase or I see a rhythmic phrase, I hear it in my head and then I execute that. So there's no breakdown in the neural pathway. And so I'm working on a book. Like I have a book that I'm working on for that. And it would be intended for like, you could be, if you've got an advanced like middle school all the way up to college. Cause I have kids at the community college that come in and good players, but they're like, I really need to learn how to read music. Yeah. So I don't think it's I think it's kind of ageless in a way. It's kind of one of those things that it could be used in any time of academic setting or for someone that's one. So I've got those projects ahead of me and pretty stoked about it. I've got some hefty goals for 2023, but nice. Just making some good choices and excited about it. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, awesome. I know you play locally too, and that's how we've met each other. I've played with you, some gigs with you, and did a recording session, things like that. But anything local that you might want to mention?
Yeah, I'm an active participant. So first of all, if you're ever in Charlotte and you want to hit a jam session, Monday night they have the Bill Hanna Legacy Jam, and it's hosted by Ziad Rabi, who's a tenor saxophone player in town. Ziad is one of many students that were taught by a man named Bill Hanna, who's kind of he is kind of a legend in Charlotte. He's passed away, and so this jam session is in his honor because he used to host a jam session every Monday. So it's at Petra's Bar, which is in Charlotte. It's in the Plaza Midwood area. It's every Monday night from 7:30 to 10, and anybody can sit in. And then I'm a regular contributor to the Jazz at the Beckler series, which is at the Beckler Museum. And that's the first Friday of every month in Charlotte. I do about half of that series. I share that with some other really wonderful drummers. And then I have my own band. I'm writing right now to do a new record. So I'm kind of waiting to do some shows, but I have my own thing called the Fortet, which is a specific project that's like 4 members, and it's written more straight ahead. And then my other music, which just says my name, Alfred Sergel 4, that's more my blending of pop and rock, which like I've really been working on, where I sing and drum. I'm adding in some vocals, kind of catering to those influences that I've had more in the fusion world, and along with like my love for Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, a lot of really good pop, and blending those two worlds. So the last single I did was called The Falling Out, and I was able to get some good friends on the project. So Tim LaFave was playing bass. Tim has played on the last Bowie record, Nice. So, and I just happened to know him. So I asked him if he would play on it, and he was spectacular. And then Martin, who we've been talked about earlier, Martin Bejarano played on it. So it features those guys. It's my original song. I'm singing and playing drums. And it's real fusing of sort of like a intelligent pop with like some really killer jazz musicians who both, like Tim is definitely in the jazz scene, but also in the pop scene. Martin's definitely more in the jazz scene, but has a love for pop. So I just kind of brought guys together. And so I'm still writing a lot, but yeah, locally Petra's, Beckler. And then anytime I am involved with Jazz Art Charlotte, I'm on staff there. I teach there. And then when they have performances that I'm available to do, I usually am involved in some of the Jazz Arts Charlotte, which is run by OC and Lonnie Davis. Great educational program. So yeah, I keep pretty busy, but I think most musicians, it's kind of a necessary thing.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, man, this has been just great talking to you. I really appreciate you doing this. Anything you'd like to say in closing? Anything else?
No, I would like to just encourage you guys, if you are like, yeah, sometimes it sounds kind of like, okay, I grew up as a musician's kid. I have met so many people that didn't grow up in musical families who just had a dream and and were willing to ask questions. I can't this is kind of my thing right now, but I feel like with all the content that we're being inundated with, I just want to encourage people, if you're a student out there, you don't have to know it all.
Yeah.
You don't have to know it all. The reason why I'm a curious person. I ask a lot of questions. I'm still taking lessons. I'm learning a whole nother thing right now on the drums. And it's like, I'm 51. I've been doing music professionally for 31 years. And I just want to tell you, like, I feel like a lot of the anxiety that I feel with students and some of the, I'll just cultural things, not to get too deep, but within our culture, there's so much content. I feel like there's a lot of students feel like they need to know it, or they should know it because it's out there. And that's not true. And you don't need to think that way. People like Keith are available. I'm available. Other instructors that you have are available, and you should ask questions because that's how you learn. And I just want to encourage that, because I've seen a lot of people that are not, you'd never think were super talented. They put in the work. They put themselves in positions to ask the right people. And one of my friends in particular is like on the Universal record label as a solo classical artist. I mean, no one would have thought this particular person would have been at this level. And it's like, he put in the work, he put in the time. He got good at the business as well. But I can only stress that, like, if you really want this, there are people out there that want to help you. And you just need to be willing to do the work and ask questions. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to answer those and help you. And that's what I think. That's why I like to teach. That's why I like education. And that's kind of probably my mantra right now is like, man, ask questions. I just feel a lot of students, when I'm in the classroom, I teach a lot of different in-person classes, and I'm like, why didn't you ask me? And a lot of people, there's a lot of fear in that right now because there's so much information out there. I feel like even I have 3 adult age daughters, and I feel like sometimes they don't want to ask questions. So that would be my ending statement is like, y'all, if you want to learn, ask questions. And it's okay to ask questions. That's how you learn about people. That's how you build relationships. That's how you learn. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, it's okay to be curious and ask questions, and if you ask a person and they're mean, there's a whole lot of other people that you can ask and just leave that person behind.
Exactly. Right on, man. Right on.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Keith. So good to see you, man. I hopefully we'll get a chance to play again soon.
Yeah, I hope so too, man. And thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for checking out Notes on Jazz. If you want to communicate with me, I offer free consultations. Just check the podcast notes for a link. You can also find a link to my website for CDs, downloads, and videos. See you next time at Notes on Jazz.